The arrogant doctor pointed at me in front of everyone and called security to throw me out of the hospital. What he didn't know was that a kind nurse had just made a phone call that would change everything. My husband Andrew was about to show him who really runs this place. You know, there are moments in life when everything changes in an instant, when the ground shifts beneath your feet and suddenly the world looks completely different. I'm Marilyn, and I want to tell you about the day that changed everything for me. If you've ever been judged by your appearance, this story will hit you right in the heart. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell because you won't want to miss how this unfolds. Trust me, the ending will leave you speechless. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Marilyn, and I've been married to Andrew for 15 years. Now, Andrew isn't just any husband. He's the chief of surgery at Metro General Hospital, one of the most prestigious medical facilities in our city. But here's the thing about us. We've always lived simply. Despite Andrew's successful career and the comfortable life it provides, I've never been one for fancy clothes or expensive jewelry. I prefer my old brown coat that I've had for years, my worn leather purse that still works perfectly fine, and simple dresses that make me feel comfortable. Andrew never minded this about me. In fact, he loved that I wasn't impressed by status or wealth. He would often say that my genuine heart was what made him fall in love with me in the first place. We kept our personal life very private. Most people at his hospital had never even met me. Andrew believed in maintaining professional boundaries, and I respected that completely. That Tuesday morning started like any other. Andrew had left early for the hospital. He had 3 major surgeries scheduled back-to-back. I remember him kissing my forehead and telling me he'd be unreachable most of the day because he'd be in the operating room. I smiled and told him to save lives, our little morning ritual that always made him chuckle. But by noon, I was dealing with severe chest pains that had been bothering me for weeks. I'd been putting off getting it checked, but that day it became unbearable. I knew I needed to see a doctor immediately. The closest hospital was Metro General, Andrew's hospital. I thought about calling him, but I knew he was in surgery and couldn't be disturbed. Besides, I figured I could handle a simple doctor's visit on my own. I grabbed my old brown coat and my trusty leather purse, the same one I'd been carrying for nearly a decade. Looking in the mirror, I saw exactly what I always saw, a simple woman in simple clothes. It never occurred to me that this would be a problem. After all, I was just going to see a doctor. The moment I walked into Metro General Hospital, I felt the difference. Everything was gleaming marble and polished chrome. Well-dressed people moved through the corridors with purpose. The reception area was filled with patients who looked like they'd stepped out of a magazine. Designer handbags, expensive suits, jewelry that caught the light. And then there was me in my old brown coat and comfortable shoes. I approached the reception desk and gave my information to the woman behind the counter. She looked me up and down with barely concealed disdain, but she processed my paperwork anyway. The waiting area was crowded, and I found a seat in the corner, trying to make myself invisible while the chest pains continued to worry me. That's when I first saw Dr. Harrison. He was a tall man in his 40s, with perfectly styled hair and an expensive watch that gleamed on his wrist. He moved through the waiting area like he owned the place, greeting some patients warmly while completely ignoring others. When his eyes fell on me, I saw something that made my stomach turn. Judgment, pure and simple. "Mrs. Patterson?" he called out, reading from his clipboard. I stood up and walked toward him, clutching my purse nervously. The moment I reached him, his demeanor changed completely. His smile disappeared, and he looked me over with obvious disapproval. "You're here for chest pains?" he asked, his voice already dismissive. When I nodded, he sighed heavily. "Do you have insurance?" "Real insurance? Not some government assistance program?" The question stung, but I answered politely that yes, I had excellent insurance through my husband's job. Dr. Harrison raised an eyebrow skeptically and looked me up and down again, taking in my simple clothes and worn purse. "Really?" he said loudly enough for others to hear. "What exactly does your husband do?" I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment. Several patients in the waiting area had turned to watch our conversation. "He works here at the hospital," I said quietly, hoping that would satisfy him. Dr. Harrison laughed. Actually laughed. "Oh, let me guess. Janitor? Cafeteria worker? Look, lady, I don't know what game you're trying to play, but this is a serious medical facility. We deal with real patients who can afford real treatment. The waiting room had gone completely quiet now. Everyone was staring at me, and I felt smaller and smaller with each passing second. My chest pains were getting worse, but the humiliation was even more painful. I can pay for my treatment, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I just need someone to look at my chest pains. Chest pains? Dr. Harrison's voice dripped with sarcasm. Let me save you some time and money. You probably pulled a muscle cleaning houses or something. Go home, take some over-the-counter pain medication, and stop wasting everyone's time here. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was a doctor, someone who had taken an oath to help people, and he was refusing to even examine me because of how I looked. But the worst was yet to come. Doctor, please, I said, the desperation clear in my voice. These pains are really severe. I'm worried something might be seriously wrong. Dr. Harrison turned to address the entire waiting room as if I were some kind of entertainment. You see this, everyone? This is exactly what's wrong with healthcare today. People come in here thinking they can get free handouts, claiming they have insurance they can't possibly afford. They waste our time and resources that should be going to real patients who actually belong here. The humiliation was complete. 40 people were staring at me like I was some kind of fraud. Some looked sympathetic, but others were nodding in agreement with Dr. Harrison. I felt tears starting to form in my eyes, but I was determined not to cry in front of all these people. I'm not asking for charity, I managed to say. I just want to be examined by a doctor. No, Dr. Harrison said firmly. I've wasted enough time on this charade. You clearly don't understand how things work here. This isn't some free clinic downtown. This is Metro General Hospital, where we treat serious patients with serious conditions and serious insurance. That's when he did something that still makes my blood boil when I think about it. He turned toward the security desk and made a gesture. Security! Security, please come over here. 2 large guards in uniform started walking toward us. The entire waiting room was watching now, like we were putting on some kind of show. I felt my face burning with shame and anger, but I also felt something else. A growing determination not to let this man destroy my dignity completely. What seems to be the problem, doctor? One of the security guards asked. Remove this woman from the hospital immediately, Dr. Harrison said, pointing at me like I was some kind of criminal. She's been wasting everyone's time, claiming to have insurance she obviously doesn't possess, and disrupting the environment for our real patients. The security guard looked at me with sympathy in his eyes, but he had his job to do. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. I stood there, surrounded by dozens of people, being treated like a criminal because I didn't look wealthy enough to deserve medical care. But just as I was about to give up and walk away, I noticed something that gave me the first spark of hope I'd felt since this nightmare began. There was a nurse standing near the nursing station, and she was staring at me with recognition in her eyes. Her name tag read, Jennifer, and she looked like she couldn't believe what she was witnessing. She kept looking from me to Dr. Harrison and back again, and I could see the wheels turning in her mind. Nurse Jennifer had been working at Metro General for 8 years. She'd seen Andrew bring me to the hospital Christmas party twice, and she'd been present at several staff meetings where Andrew had mentioned his wife Marilyn. She knew exactly who I was, and she was watching in horror as one of the doctors under Andrew's supervision publicly humiliated his wife. While Dr. Harrison continued his tirade and the security guards waited for his final word, Nurse Jennifer quietly stepped away from the growing crowd. She walked quickly to the nearest phone and dialed a number she knew by heart, the direct line to the chief of surgery's office. "This is Jennifer from the main floor," she whispered urgently. "Is Dr. Andrew available?" "It's an emergency involving his wife." The secretary on the other end knew that Andrew was in surgery, but the word emergency and wife together meant this couldn't wait. She immediately sent word to the operating room that Dr. Andrew Patterson had an urgent family emergency and needed to be contacted immediately. Meanwhile, back in the waiting area, Dr. Harrison was reaching the climax of his performance. "You see, everyone," he announced to the room. "This is exactly the kind of person who's ruining healthcare for the rest of us. She comes in here in her thrift store clothes, claiming to have insurance, expecting us to drop everything and cater to her imaginary problems." The security guards were getting impatient. One of them gently took my arm and said, "Ma'am, please come with us." I looked around the room one more time, seeing the faces of all the people who had witnessed my humiliation. Some looked ashamed for me, others looked annoyed that their waiting time had been interrupted by this drama, but I held my head high because I knew something that Dr. Harrison didn't know yet. "I'll leave," I said quietly, "but you should know that you're making the biggest mistake of your professional career." Dr. Harrison laughed again. "Oh, really? And why is that? Are you going to call your husband the janitor to come fight your battles?" Just then, Nurse Jennifer appeared at the edge of the crowd, slightly out of breath from running. She caught my eye and gave me the smallest nod, a silent message that help was on the way. I felt a surge of gratitude toward this woman who barely knew me, but had recognized the injustice of the situation. "Yes," I said, looking Dr. Harrison straight in the eye, "I think I will call my husband." The security guards had almost escorted me to the main entrance when we heard a commotion behind us. The elevator doors had opened with a sharp ding, and someone was walking very quickly across the marble floor. The sound of expensive dress shoes echoed through the lobby, and I could hear conversations stopping as people turned to see what was happening. "Excuse me?" a voice called out, a voice I knew better than any other in the world. "Excuse me? What exactly is going on here?" I turned around to see Andrew striding across the lobby, still in his surgical scrubs, his face a mask of controlled fury. He'd obviously left the operating room in the middle of a procedure, something he would never do unless it was a true emergency. His eyes found mine immediately, and I saw relief flood his features when he confirmed I was safe. The security guards stopped immediately when they saw Andrew. Everyone in the hospital knew who he was, the tall, distinguished man who ran the surgical department, who made decisions that affected hundreds of lives every day. But Dr. Harrison, who had been facing away from the elevator, hadn't seen Andrew arrive yet. "Sir," one of the security guards said to Andrew, "we were just escorting this woman out per Dr. Harrison's request." Andrew's jaw tightened. "Dr. Harrison's request?" He looked around the crowded waiting area where 40 people were watching this drama unfold like it was a movie. His eyes found Dr. Harrison, who was still standing near the reception desk, looking pleased with himself. "Dr. Harrison," Andrew called out, his voice carrying the unmistakable authority of someone used to being obeyed, "would you mind explaining to me why my wife is being escorted out of our hospital by security?" The change in Dr. Harrison's face was instantaneous. The color drained from his cheeks, and his mouth fell open as he realized what Andrew had just said. His wife, the woman he'd been humiliating for the past 20 minutes, was the wife of the chief of surgery. Your wife?" Dr. Harrison stammered, looking from Andrew to me and back again. "Yes," Andrew said, walking over to where I stood with the security guards. He put his arm around my shoulders protectively. "My wife, Marilyn. The woman you apparently felt was unworthy of medical care at the hospital where I'm the chief of surgery." The waiting room was completely silent now. You could have heard a pin drop. Everyone was staring at this unfolding drama, realizing they were witnessing something extraordinary. Dr. Harrison started walking toward us, his hands raised in a gesture of panic. "Dr. Patterson, I had no idea. She didn't tell me. I mean, look at how she's dressed." "How she's dressed?" Andrew's voice was dangerously quiet. "Are you telling me that you refused medical care to a patient because you didn't like her clothing?" No, that's not. I mean..." Dr. Harrison was completely flustered now, realizing that every word he said was making things worse. "She said her husband worked at the hospital, but she didn't specify. I thought maybe maintenance or..." "So you assumed that because my wife dresses modestly, she must be married to a janitor and therefore unworthy of your attention." Andrew's voice was getting louder now, and his anger was becoming harder to control. You assumed that her simple clothes meant she was lying about having insurance? Dr. Harrison looked around desperately, as if hoping someone would rescue him from this situation. But everyone in the waiting room was staring at him with expressions ranging from shock to disgust. He'd shown his true character in front of dozens of witnesses, and there was no taking it back. Dr. Patterson, please understand, I was just trying to... We get a lot of people who can't pay, and I was trying to protect the hospital's resources. By humiliating my wife in front of a room full of people, Andrew's control finally snapped. By calling security to have her physically removed from the building because you decided she didn't look wealthy enough to deserve medical attention. Nurse Jennifer stepped forward from the crowd. Dr. Patterson, she said quietly, I witnessed the entire incident. Dr. Harrison refused to examine your wife, made several derogatory comments about her appearance, and told the entire waiting room that she was wasting everyone's time and taking resources from real patients. Andrew looked at Jennifer gratefully, then turned his attention back to Dr. Harrison. Is this true? Dr. Harrison opened his mouth to deny it, but then he looked around the waiting room and saw 40 pairs of eyes staring at him. Every single person had witnessed his behavior, and there was no point in lying. Dr. Patterson, he said desperately, I sincerely apologize. If I had known she was your wife? If you had known she was my wife? Andrew interrupted. So it would have been perfectly acceptable to treat any other patient this way, as long as she wasn't married to someone important? The question hung in the air, and Dr. Harrison realized he'd walked into a trap of his own making. Anything he said now would only make him look worse. Andrew turned to address the entire waiting room. I want everyone here to understand something. What happened here today is completely unacceptable and does not represent the values of Metro General Hospital. Every patient who walks through these doors deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their appearance, their background, or their ability to pay. I personally apologize to anyone who witnessed this shameful display. Then he turned back to Dr. Harrison. You will report to my office first thing tomorrow morning. We'll be discussing whether you have a future at this hospital. Dr. Harrison's face went completely white. He knew that his career at Metro General Hospital was probably over, and word of this incident would spread throughout the medical community. His arrogance and prejudice had cost him everything. Andrew gently took my arm and started walking toward the medical wing. Mrs. Patterson needs to be examined immediately for chest pains. Nurse Jennifer, would you please arrange for her to see Dr. Martinez in cardiology and make sure she receives the absolute best care this hospital has to offer? As we walked away from the crowd, I could hear the conversations starting up behind us. People were talking in hushed, amazed voices about what they'd just witnessed. Some were expressing sympathy for what I'd endured. Others were discussing how shocked they were by Dr. Harrison's behavior. But as we entered the medical wing, I felt something I hadn't felt since this whole ordeal began. Hope. Not just hope for my health, but hope that maybe this incident would change things for other patients who might not have a chief of surgery for a husband. Andrew held my hand as we walked down the corridor. I'm so sorry you had to go through that, he said softly. I should have insisted on taking you to see a doctor myself. You couldn't have known, I replied, and maybe this needed to happen. Maybe Dr. Harrison needed to learn this lesson, and maybe everyone in that waiting room needed to see what happens when we judge people by their appearance. Nurse Jennifer caught up with us as we reached the cardiology department. Mrs. Patterson, she said, I just wanted you to know that not everyone here thinks like Dr. Harrison. Most of us became nurses and doctors because we genuinely want to help people, no matter who they are. I squeezed her hand gratefully. Thank you for making that phone call. You saved me from something that could have gotten much worse. It was the right thing to do, she said simply. Dr. Martinez turned out to be everything Dr. Harrison was not. He treated me with kindness and respect, conducted a thorough examination, and discovered that I was indeed having cardiac episodes that required immediate attention. If Dr. Harrison had had his way, and I'd gone home to take over-the-counter medication, I could have had a serious heart attack. 3 hours later, as I was resting in a private room with Andrew by my side, Nurse Jennifer stopped by to check on me. "I thought you'd want to know," she said with a small smile. "Word of what happened has spread throughout the hospital. Dr. Harrison submitted his resignation an hour ago." Andrew nodded grimly. That was probably his best option. After what he did today, his career here was effectively over anyway. "But there's more," Jennifer continued. "The hospital administration has already announced new sensitivity training for all staff, and they're implementing new policies to ensure that every patient is treated with equal respect and dignity. What happened today is going to change things for the better." As Jennifer left the room, I realized that my terrible experience had turned into something positive. Dr. Harrison's prejudice and cruelty had been exposed in the most public way possible, and it was going to result in better treatment for future patients. Andrew squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you," he said. "You handled that situation with more grace and dignity than he deserved." "I just kept thinking about all the other people who might face the same treatment," I replied. "People who don't have a husband in a position of authority to defend them. If my humiliation prevents someone else from going through the same thing, then maybe it was worth it." Looking back on that day now, I realize it taught me something important about the power of assumptions and the danger of judging people by their appearance. Dr. Harrison looked at my simple clothes and old coat and decided I wasn't worth his time or respect. He had no idea that the woman he was humiliating was married to his boss, but more importantly, he had no idea that she was a human being deserving of basic dignity, regardless of who she was married to. The story spread beyond the hospital. Local news picked it up, and it became a talking point about healthcare equality and the importance of treating every patient with respect. Dr. Harrison became a cautionary tale, while Nurse Jennifer was recognized for doing the right thing in a difficult situation. But for me, the most important outcome was the change I saw in the hospital culture. On my follow-up visits, I noticed that staff members were more conscious of how they treated all patients. The incident had created an awareness that wasn't there before, and that awareness was making a real difference in people's lives. If this story touched you, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Have you ever experienced something similar? Drop your story in the comments below. I read every single one. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible true stories that will restore your faith in justice. Hit that bell icon so you never miss when karma strikes back. Remember, you never know who someone really is just by looking at them. The person in simple clothes standing next to you might be the most important person in the room. Treat everyone with kindness and respect, not because of who they might be, but because it's simply the right thing to do.